Okay everybody, if you are ever wondering how exactly you are supposed to set the overweight limit switch on this Betamax, it has a lot to do with these two bolts and a whole bunch of weights. There's very many misconceptions as to what these two bolts do. They are not designed to be screwed in and touching this rung on the ladder track. They are not supposed to be screwed up so that way they're clamped tight. These do not clamp against the rung. Okay, so this here is a square that moves up and down. And as you can see underneath, there is a nut. Do you see that hex nut? On the corner of that hex nut is a weld which fits into the corner of this square. This square helps that nut go up or down. You cannot see it, but that nut is either going up, releasing the tension on the spring, or it is going down, compressing the tension on the spring. This spring is deciding how much pressure you can put onto the hoist. Now, where's my screwdriver? I got a nice screwdriver right here. We're going to put it into there. I'm going to go up and down, and you see it move when I do that. That's exactly what the hoist is meant to do. Okay, there's supposed to be a gap in there. You see it go moving? When it goes down like this, that is the upward motion of the hoist. That is also the downward motion of the bolt. And the spring is compressing. Okay? Now, these two have to be in tune and in line with one another, so that way when the motor goes up, the rung comes down, the rung presses against the bolt here, which also presses against that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go home and I'm going to do a mock version of these two and take these out and apart so that way you guys have an idea of what they look like for further explanation. Alright, so this is the mock version of what we have for the spring hookup that is on a Betamax. This is normally what it looks like when it's hooked up. Okay, the only thing that is missing is the square tube. Now, because this is a homemade setup, I could not find a square tube anywhere that fits over this in Canadian Tire, and that's where this all cost me. This is a compression spring that is used in the Betamax hoist. This is not that particular spring, it's just a mock, okay? It's compression spring because it says right there, and that is what I used. All right, so let's talk about how this works. Now, this spring is welded whatever to the frame. Okay, this metal bar here represents the frame of the Betamax hoist. This is just one side. Okay, this is the right side, the left side. So I didn't want to get too many of these, so I just used one for demonstration purposes. But the square tube that is on this has a knob on it. That knob, which is right there, which is represented by the end of the zip tie, is what goes into the corner of the square tube, so that way when you spin the nuts on here, this is supposed to be a nut, by the way, I couldn't find any nuts or actual bolts to spin this, so I just use a carriage bolt. This is a hex head. I think it's 1/16", and you turn this, and this nut stays stationary because of this fits into the square tube, into the corner, and this goes up or down, okay? That nut goes, if you turn it like you're tightening it this way, this nut goes down, and then loosening it goes up this way. So it puts tension on the spring, or it releases the tension, okay? So this is the schematic diagram of how it should look overhead. As you can see, the knob right there is what I was talking about. It fits right into the corner of the square tube, and when you are turning it, this knob goes up or down, okay? So let's say that we are turning this. You see how that knob right there is going everywhere? So this needs to fit into the corner of the square tube like you see right there, and it will not do that. Now, the bolt is supposed to stick up a little bit from here, and what that does is it hits the rung. You know what? Hold on. Let me get something to represent the rung. Okay, back. So, this here represents a rung. This here represents the top part of the frame here that's attached to the hoist. Now, because of the fact that the rung is stationary, this does not move. The hoist actually does move. The hoist moves up and down because of the weight on the carriage. And when the hoist goes up in this direction, the top of the threads of this will hit the rung. Okay, so the top of the threads are in line with the top of the switch, the kill switch. Okay, so they are always going to be the same height no matter what. Now, where the spring comes in is when the rung is pushing down on the threads of this. This part is not moving. This part is moving, as you just seen in the last video. Okay, this goes up and down like that. Okay, and I'm using one hand here because that's all I have. So, when the pressure is on the top of that nut from the load, it presses on the spring, and this comes down. It goes up and down just like this. Okay, this is the motion that it makes. All right? Now, I want to show everybody something about the spring. Now, for those of you that are wondering, why is there a spring? Why is there a nut? And what exactly does this spring do when it comes to the load? Okay, this is a compression spring, and all springs are affected by the weight. So with two springs like this, there's one here and there's one here. Okay, so you got two springs that are affecting the weight of the load on the Betamax, and that weight pushes on the spring. So I got a diagram here I want to show everybody. These are the two springs, the one on the right and the one on the left. Okay, that's just by this is totally not according to scale, but this line here represents complete total relax of, and that is 0 pounds, 0 lbs. Okay, so 0 lbs, 0 pounds of weight on the spring. There is 0 weight on these two springs. The moment you put weight on there, let's say 100 pounds, the spring compresses to this level right here. If you put 200 pounds, if you put 300 pounds, 400 pounds, and so on. Now, the Betamax has a maximum capacity that you're supposed to put on there, 450 pounds, which is right around here, okay? And these two springs have to be exactly the same tension on both sides. So if you're gonna turn one nut 5 turns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to do the same thing on the left side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is a procedure that you're supposed to use in the Betamax manual for setting the load rating for the limit switch to go off. You're not supposed to go past 450 pounds because that puts extreme strain on the rest of the components that make up the Betamax. Okay, so this remember, these two springs are the same. They should never be changed. They should never be swapped out, simply because they are welded to this part here. So if you're gonna get rid of this spring, you got to remove this part here, and this is welded to the motor. So there's no such thing as swapping out the springs at all. Okay, so because my freaking model here is a little homemade, normally, under certain circumstances, that thread there sticks up about 1/4 of an inch and it goes up to there, okay? Now, the motor, when it's bobbing up and down, it'll go hit the bottom of the rung like this. Boom, 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 boom. But when you have a load and the springs are set to that, 450, that means you can put as much weight as you want, and the load that is on the hoist will not hit the rung. Okay, so the top of this, like I said, is in line with the top of the switch, and if you want to play with that switch, you can press it with a screwdriver and it should go off. Like press, 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 press. It should go off and not lift at all. The moment that switch is pressed down, nothing will happen. Okay? So, having said that, there is a process which you need to read the manual for on setting the pressure, setting this here for the weight limit. You're not supposed to go past 450. You should never have access to twisting this at all. And just so everybody knows, the top of this thread should never be touching this at all. A lot of misconceptions people have is if you twist this, this will go up and this will fasten right against tight to the rung, and that'll prevent the motor from going up and down. That is not the case. You are not supposed to do that. Okay, this bolt is never meant to hit the bottom of the rung on the beta hoist. This complete setup right here that you have seen me right here is just to set the limit switch, and that is it. Okay? If you need any further questions or answers, I could provide these to you. Please send them in the comments below. Thank you, everybody. That will be all. So when it comes to using the manual with regards to the limit switch, you need to go to chapter 10.3.8. It talks about the overweight limit switch. It talks about how to adjust the overweight limit switch. And it talks about how to perform the overweight limit switch adjustment. You can go into Betamax and download these 2 pages, and it will give you all the information that you need to know.